On a gentle early summer afternoon, soft sunlight streamed down onto the quiet residential streets of Newton. Having finished my 12-hour hospital shift, I was heading to my mother-in-law's house to check on her, as had become my routine. The hydrangeas blooming in her garden swayed gently in the breeze. It was 8 years ago when I first set foot in this white 2-story house. Back then, I was just a nurse working at the local emergency center. And even now, I continue to work at the same hospital. The 7 years since meeting Tom, getting married, and becoming part of this family have been like a dream come true. As I unlock the front door, my eyes drift to the garden. The wooden deck holds memories of family barbecues, George, my father-in-law, proudly grilling meat, Martha, my mother-in-law, serving her homemade potato salad, and Carol, my sister-in-law, taking photos with a smile. Back then, everyone believed this happiness would last forever. "Martha, I'm back," I call out softly as I enter the living room, where I find Martha knitting in her favorite chair by the window. Her profile, backlit by the sunlight, looks thinner than before. "Oh, Linda. You're early today," Martha greets me with a gentle smile. Her expression still carries the dignified intelligence from her days as a high school English teacher. She's like a real mother to me. From the beginning of my marriage, she opened her heart to me even more than to Carol, her own daughter. There weren't many emergency cases today. "You look a bit pale. Are you feeling all right?" My professional instincts as a nurse kick in as I check on her condition. Martha smiles gently at my concerned expression. "Don't worry. I'm just a little tired. But you, coming here after your shift." I shake my head at her words. "Don't mind that. This is my daily routine, isn't it?" Indeed, this checking in became my daily routine 3 years ago. When Martha was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, our family's life changed dramatically. Shortly after the diagnosis, the doctor gave us a prognosis of 6 months to a year. That harsh news devastated our entire family. But Martha was strong. She didn't give up. And we, her family, desperately supported her. The annual treatment costs of $150,000 were somehow managed through medical insurance, Martha's savings from her teaching days, and her pension. "Shall I make some tea?" I call out as I head to the kitchen, and Martha's gentle voice follows me. "Thank you, Linda. Having you here means so much to me." As I pour hot water into the teapot, I gaze out the window. Various flowers that Martha has carefully tended bloom in her garden. The rosemary bushes she's particularly proud of are at their peak right now. While making tea, my memories naturally drift back to the past. Shortly after getting married, during our first Thanksgiving in this house, Martha served a traditional turkey dinner and carefully taught me each recipe. "These were passed down from my mother," she said, her eyes filled with pride and love. Carol had kept her distance even then. Perhaps because she was closer to Sarah, her stepmother, than to Martha, her birth mother. Still, during holiday gatherings, she seemed to genuinely enjoy herself with the whole family. Returning to the living room with the tea tray, I find Martha looking through a photo album. The photo shows our whole family smiling in the garden during last year's Memorial Day. George stands proudly with his arms crossed, Tom gently places his hand on my shoulder, Carol beams brightly, and Martha smiles serenely. "Everyone looked so happy back then," Martha says, and I quietly nod. Indeed, before the illness was discovered, we could gather with such natural smiles. Now, it seems there's a slight shadow over everyone's expressions. The change in George's attitude, in particular, has been notable. "Is your father-in-law out again today?" When I casually ask, Martha's expression turns slightly lonely. Yes, he left this morning and hasn't returned. Lately, he's hardly ever home. I couldn't respond to those words. The pressure of the high treatment costs was clearly eroding our family bonds. Still, I strongly desire to protect this family's happiness. It's not just my duty as a nurse, it comes from a pure wish to protect my precious family. After finishing tea with Martha, I take out my blue-covered notebook as usual and begin writing today's care record. This notebook contains all the records since Martha's battle with illness began. Temperature, blood pressure, food intake, and even mood changes, I meticulously record everything. This is both a habit as a nurse and an essential task to catch any subtle changes in Martha's condition. Linda, you don't need to keep such detailed records. At Martha's gentle voice, I look up and smile. This is part of my job. Besides, it helps when consulting with the doctor, doesn't it? In fact, thanks to these records, we can closely track the changes in side effects from the FOLFIRINOX therapy, quickly responding to symptoms like loss of appetite, insomnia, and peripheral neuropathy. Even the attending physician at Massachusetts General Hospital relies on my records to adjust medication dosages. As both a medical professional and family member, I want to do everything I can. While writing the records, I recall last night's shift. A succession of emergency transports made for a hectic 12 hours. Still, I wanted to ensure time for Martha's care. For that, I've arranged my shifts with the understanding and cooperation of my hospital colleagues. My colleague Jennifer says, "You're an angel," but to me, it's just natural. Balancing hospital work 5 days a week with caregiving isn't easy, but being able to use my 15 years of nursing experience is at least some consolation. I adjust my work shifts to provide care for Martha during the day whenever possible. Weeks with night shifts are especially challenging, but I can't give up. What Martha needs isn't just care, it's the warmth of family. Shall we tend to the garden now? On nice days, I always go out to the garden with Martha. This is one of the activities recommended by her primary physician. Appropriate sunlight and fresh air are important for maintaining Martha's immune system. Plus, horticultural therapy is effective for both physical and mental rehabilitation. As a nurse, I know this well. This is our important daily routine. While guiding Martha in her wheelchair to the garden, I feel the changing seasons. The rosemary planted next to the hydrangeas is thriving under Martha's guidance. Look, Linda. This rosemary has grown so beautifully. Pride seeps into Martha's voice. When tending to plants, she becomes as lively as when she used to stand at the podium teaching high school. It's all thanks to your teaching. I knew nothing about gardening before. While touching the soil, I listened to the sound of the wind. This quiet time has become invaluable healing for us. However, other family members don't share in this peaceful time. George's absences are increasing day by day, and his return times keep getting later. He used to always spend holidays with the family, but now he doesn't come home until late, claiming work socializing. When he does return, he seems somewhat irritated and barely looks at Martha's condition before shutting himself in his room. Last Sunday, during a rare family dinner when everyone was present, he seemed restless. Frequently checking his smartphone and worrying about incoming calls, he showed no trace of the mild-mannered father-in-law he once was. Perhaps the pressure of treatment costs has changed him. Even on holidays, he finds excuses to be away from home. Carol remains absorbed in her social media posts, desperate to project an image of perfect life that shows no sign of her mother's illness. Recently, she proudly posted a photo of her new luxury brand bag. Though she barely visits her mother's hospital room once a month, she never fails to post about family bonds on social media. I feel conflicted about this contradiction. She's preoccupied with showing off luxury brands. And Tom, facing a promotion at his IT company, barely comes home, using work as an excuse. He's away on business trips half the week. Though he shows concern for his mother's condition, he rarely takes action. I'm leaving it to you, Linda. You've got this, he says, entrusting everything to me. While grateful for his words, I sometimes feel lonely. Everyone has their own life to live. Martha says this with a smile, but deep loneliness dwells in her eyes. Perhaps the lively holiday gatherings of the past will never return. One rainy afternoon, after finishing the usual care routine, Martha called out to me. Linda, could you listen to something? There was an unusual weight in her voice. Martha took out a small recorder from her bedside table drawer. Carol gave me this for Christmas. Lately, I've been thinking about various things. I want to leave a record. I nodded silently. Martha pressed the recorder's button and began speaking quietly. Linda, you're my angel. Without you these past 3 years, I don't think I could have endured. Tears welled up in my eyes at those words. I can feel the family changing bit by bit. Especially George. Martha's voice caught for a moment. I'm worried about the treatment costs too. They're certainly expensive, but they should have been manageable with savings and insurance. I held my breath. Anxiety and doubt seeped through Martha's voice. But I'm so glad you've been here. Linda, you've stood by me as both a nurse and a daughter. No words can express my gratitude enough. When the recorder button stopped, a heavy silence fell over the room. Martha's confession felt like a last will and testament. Linda, promise me. This stays our secret. Don't tell George or Carol yet. I silently held Martha's hand. It was cold and trembling slightly. Outside the window, the evening sky was beginning to turn red. Tomorrow would bring another new day. And I would continue to support Martha within this family. Because that was the path I had chosen. After Martha moved to the hospice ward at Massachusetts General Hospital, her condition changed rapidly. The full-body deterioration from end-stage pancreatic cancer was faster than expected, and within a week of admission, oral intake became difficult, requiring morphine for pain management. As the early autumn trees outside the window began to change color, I requested special leave from my hospital supervisor, Margaret. I want to be by her side until the end. I understand, Linda. We'll manage the emergency department while you're away. My supervisor gently embraced my shoulders and quietly nodded. The understanding of colleagues I'd worked with for 15 years became a great support during this time. The scent of lavender, Martha's favorite, wafts through the white-based hospital room. Beside the bed are Martha's treasured Bible and the hydrangeas I replace daily. As both a nurse and family member, I stayed by Martha's side 24 hours a day. Vital sign checks, position changes, oral care. I performed all procedures with the utmost care. Sometimes fellow nurses told me to take a break, but I had no room for rest. After morphine pain management began, periods of clear consciousness gradually decreased, but Martha maintained her dignity until the very end. I held her hand all day, matching her breathing. Linda. During a brief moment of consciousness, Martha gripped my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. I'm here, Martha. In the drawer. I waited for her to continue, but Martha drifted back into quiet sleep. I opened the bedside table drawer she had pointed to. There was a single blue envelope. My name was written on it in Martha's careful handwriting. I couldn't read the letter yet. For now, I just wanted to listen to Martha's breathing and hold her hand. Family visits decreased with each passing day. George would leave after a few minutes, saying work is busy, while Carol wouldn't put down her smartphone even in the hospital room, occasionally posting messages like prayers for my beloved mother on social media while barely looking at her mother's face. Tom would endlessly take work calls in the hallway, repeatedly missing precious moments when Martha was conscious. Though I felt irritated by their behavior, I maintained composure in front of Martha. From my nursing experience, I understood better than anyone that what was needed during this time was a peaceful environment. Everyone's busy, aren't they? One day, Martha murmured these words. Her voice held no trace of blame, only deep understanding and acceptance. But having you here, really. I felt a lump form in my throat. Of course. Martha, you're my precious family. The final week felt like a long dream. Outside the window, autumn rain fell quietly, and organ music occasionally drifted in from the chapel. I utilized all my professional knowledge as a nurse to ensure Martha felt as little pain as possible. Then, on a morning with strong winter winds, Martha peacefully passed away while holding my hand. Her final expression was as if she had fallen into a peaceful sleep. Goodbye, Martha. As tears ran down my cheeks, I opened the blue envelope for the first time. To my beloved Linda. You were my pride and hope. Because you were here these past 3 years, I could face forward and live. But there are some things that worry me. I feel something's wrong with George. About the treatment costs. The latter half of the letter trailed off, perhaps due to Martha's deteriorating condition. However, her intended meaning was clear. I carefully tucked the letter into my bag and took a deep breath. There wasn't even time to grieve before events rapidly unfolded. As soon as funeral preparations began, George's attitude changed completely. His previously reserved demeanor vanished, replaced by a high-handed manner of giving orders. This is a family matter. Outsiders need not interfere. During the funeral arrangements meeting, George completely ignored me. Carol also suddenly began showing aggressive behavior. Who even asked you to provide care in the first place? While sorting through Martha's belongings, Carol threw pointed words at me. She seemed to deliberately avoid photographs of me displayed in the room. You may have been there when Mother passed, but that was just coincidence. It's because you're a nurse, right? Her words carried obvious hostility. When the matter of inheritance arose, the situation became even more hostile. In meetings with the lawyer, George fired off rapid questions about Martha's assets. Life insurance payment timing, bank account name changes, property right documents. He seemed somehow rushed. I'm the beneficiary of the insurance. No further investigation is necessary. George's voice mixed with poorly concealed panic. When the lawyer suggested checking the will, George's expression seemed to freeze for a moment. Carol also changed, aligning with her father's attitude. We'll discuss inheritance matters among the real family. We don't need extra people. Her words carried clear hostility. Clutching her luxury brand bag, Carol cast a condescending look at me. Throughout this, Tom maintained an ambiguous attitude. Caught between his father's high-handed behavior and his wife's dedication, he seemed unable to take either side. Linda, don't you think Dad has a point? But your dedicated care was certainly. I don't think it's good to have conflict at this time. During the family meeting in the conference room, Tom kept his head down throughout. I felt deep disappointment in his indecisive attitude. Even the trust between husband and wife seemed about to crumble under these circumstances. Hey, Tom. Are you really okay with this? To my question, he only responded with a vague smile. Perhaps he had no room to deal with family friction while facing a promotion. Or maybe this was his true nature. The peaceful expression Martha showed during that final week in the hospital now feels like a distant memory. Looking out at the continuing rain through the window, I once again etched the feelings Martha had entrusted to the blue envelope into my heart. 3 days after meeting with the lawyer and 2 days before the funeral, I had made my decision. After reviewing Martha's letter and recording, along with the evidence I had gathered, I had neatly arranged various documents in a blue file, cross-referenced with hospital records, and checked multiple times. The ticking of the large wall clock seemed unusually loud. Over these 3 days, I had mobilized all my experience as a nurse to gather evidence. Martha's treatment records, insurance claims, medication delivery records, and numerous suspicious transactions confirmed from the hospital database. All were necessary for my final duty. The last family photo with Martha displayed above the fireplace seemed to mock the current situation. Next to it was Carol's proudly displayed luxury brand bag. The arrangement perfectly illustrated this house's distortion. George sat imposingly in the mahogany reception set, while Carol stood with her arms crossed, showing an arrogant attitude. They had called me in under the pretense of final funeral arrangements. It's simple, George said forcefully. You're just an outsider. There's no inheritance. And you can't attend the funeral. Carol smirked in agreement with her father. Dressed in an expensive designer dress, she continued with an air of someone who dominated the scene. Nobody asked you to provide care in the first place. We were planning to take care of Mother ourselves. Hearing those words, I quietly smiled. While picking up the file filled with nursing records, I responded in a calm voice. Gladly. The unexpected response clouded both father and daughter's expressions for a moment. What do you mean? Carol's voice trembled slightly. I slowly opened the file and began taking out documents one by one. First, the medical trust fund transaction statement. Next, copies of insurance company invoices. Then, documents regarding medication changes. Everything clearly told the story. George, could you explain this $500,000 withdrawal record? The color drained from George's face. I continued matter-of-factly. This amount, which was recorded as Martha's treatment expenses, was actually used at the local casino. Of course, I have the security camera footage stored. What are you talking about? There can't be any evidence. George's voice rose in pitch. Carol, you forged this signature, didn't you? You were good at imitating your mother's signature. But I've seen Martha's handwriting almost daily for 3 years. The subtle differences are obvious. Carol's face turned pale beneath her makeup. And here's the most important evidence. I took out the small recorder from my pocket. It was what Martha had entrusted to me at the end. When I pressed play, Martha's voice quietly filled the room. George has been misappropriating treatment funds. My medications were switched to cheaper ones without my knowledge. Carol seems to be involved too. As George tried to stand up, I calmly stopped him. Please sit down. We're not finished yet. With my observational skills honed as a nurse, I had grasped everything. George's gambling debts exceeding $300,000. His weekend splurges at Emerald Casino, high-stakes baccarat bets. Traces of threatening collection attempts from loan sharks. Carol's credit card statements showed astounding figures. Chanel, Gucci, Hermes. $3,000 for a single bag. Monthly shopping averaging over $20,000. Crazy expenditures to maintain her celebrity wife image for social media followers. And most malicious was their sophisticated method of diverting Martha's treatment funds. I built up the facts one by one, taking notes. Records extracted from the insurance company's database. Discrepancies between medication delivery records and actual usage. Everything had been cross-referenced with my nursing records. Switching from FOLFIRINOX therapy to cheaper alternative drugs without permission. Embezzling the difference of about $150,000. Forging insurance company invoices and privately diverting the difference of about $200,000 from actual treatment costs. Further fraudulent withdrawal of $150,000 from the medical trust fund using Martha's forged signature. My voice reading out the numbers echoed in the quiet room. Replacing expensive anti-cancer drugs with cheaper alternatives and pocketing the difference. Forging insurance claims and privately diverting the difference from actual treatment costs. Withdrawing funds from the medical trust fund using Martha's forged signature. It seemed like a perfect plan. I laid out the evidence documents one by one on the table. Documents showing plans for fraudulent life insurance claims. Casino transaction records. Carol's list of expensive purchases. Everything clearly demonstrated their crimes. But you two overlooked one important thing. I wasn't just a caregiver. As a nurse with 15 years of experience, I was more sensitive than anyone to anomalies in medical records. George and Carol stared at the evidence documents with trembling hands. This isn't. Carol tried to make excuses, but I cut her off. That's enough. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I will submit this evidence to the police. Insurance fraud and medical expense misappropriation. It will be prosecuted as a federal crime. Wait. If we settle. George's voice had completely lost its authority. With trembling hands, he tried to take out a business card from his wallet. Let's call a lawyer. We can discuss this. It's too late. I cut him off with a resolute voice. The weight of witnessing patients' deaths as a nurse gave strength to my voice. Martha died in pain. She couldn't receive the best treatment she should have had. If she had received the standard FOLFIRINOX therapy, maybe. My words caught in my throat. As a healthcare professional, I also blame myself for not noticing these facts sooner. But now, I must suppress those emotions. You even exchanged her life for money. Martha believed in you until the end. You trampled on that trust. The sound of rain hitting the windows seemed to grow stronger. The curtains Martha had treasured filtered the lonely evening light. I gladly accept not attending the funeral. I'll leave this to the police. As my final duty to Martha. Linda, wait. Carol's cry reaches my back. When I turn around, her perfect makeup has crumbled, with black tears streaming down her cheeks. Her figure wrapped in the luxury brand dress now looks painfully empty. Please, our lives. To those words, I quietly shook my head. You were the ones who took Martha's life. Father and daughter watched wordlessly as I stood up. I touched the blue envelope entrusted by Martha, straightened my back, and left the room. Tom, who must have heard everything, was nowhere to be seen in the hallway. That night, the evidence I submitted to the police created bigger ripples than expected. Insurance fraud and medical expense misappropriation, serious federal crimes. The Boston Police Economic Crime Division moved immediately, and by the next morning, arrest warrants were issued for George and Carol. At the time of arrest, George no longer showed any trace of that imposing man. The nightmarish choice of involving his daughter in embezzling his wife's treatment funds to repay his Emerald Casino debts would forever change his life. How did you figure it out? With handcuffs being put on, George asked me in a trembling voice. As a nurse, my mission is to protect patients' lives. The sudden change in Martha's condition was clearly unnatural. Carol continued crying until the police arrived. Clutching her luxury brand bag, her repeated "I'm sorry, Mom," was a pitiful sight. What she had lost between social media vanity and reality was too great. The case was widely reported. Nurse uncovers medical expense fraud, guilt over not saving mother-in-law drives truth-seeking. As newspapers reported the story, I quietly watched over the execution of Martha's will. When the true will was revealed, more facts came to light. Martha had left me her book collection and the garden's rosemary. And she wished to leave part of her teacher's retirement fund as a scholarship for nursing students. You were an educator until the end, weren't you, Martha? I couldn't help but smile while reading the will. A week after the incident, Tom visited me at my hospital. His expression showed a determination I had never seen before. "Linda, I want you to hear me out." On a bench in the hospital courtyard, Tom began to speak his true feelings for the first time. That day, I heard everything in the hallway. But I didn't have the courage to take your side in front of my father. I know how much that cowardice hurt you. The autumn sunlight cast gentle shadows between us. To be honest, I still can't forgive you. But I appreciate that you came. Tom quietly nodded at my words. This might become our new starting point. The criminal trial concluded faster than expected. George received a prison sentence, while Carol received a suspended sentence. Including restitution to the insurance company and additional taxes, the price they had to pay was enormous. After the sentencing, I visited Martha's grave for the first time. While placing freshly bloomed hydrangeas on the white marble tombstone, I reread the letter from the blue envelope. To my beloved Linda. You were my angel. And you still are. By the time you read this letter, I will be gone. But my will lives on in you. You maintained the courage to do what was right until the end. Please continue to help people with that strength. You are my pride. With eternal love. Martha. While gently touching the tombstone, I spoke to Martha in my heart. I promise. I will surely carry on your wishes. Back at Massachusetts General Hospital, new medical residents were visiting the emergency department. In their earnest gazes, I see my former self. Everyone, protecting patients' lives sometimes requires major decisions. But that is our mission as medical professionals. As I spoke to the residents, I was certain. This was the new form of life that Martha had wanted for me. Outside the window, the rosemary planted in the hospital courtyard wafted its gentle fragrance.